Hi everyone. So my name is Ania Lian and I will be your teacher for this semester. And in this little broadcast, I will try to summarize what we have done today in week 1 on the campus. We had a pretty good turnout, so it was good. Um, the opposite happened on the collaborate. I waited and only one student happened to visit me on the collaborate session today. And Danielle didn't have a mic today, so that made it a little bit awkward, and I think we were both tired, so we decided that it would be okay for me to create this podcast for you today. So here we go. In your module 1, you will see that you have things there that I will actually use as a basis for our discussion today. But before I move on and get on with the class, I just wanted to introduce myself because this is what I did in our class and I think that was useful. So, as you know my name, I have a PhD in applied linguistics. My specialty is pedagogy. I do everything that informs pedagogy. So it doesn't matter whether I do with my students quality assurance or whether I'm in my PhD students or whether I myself research the use of technology or any other aspect that I explore. Everything is about how it can inform better the way I actually prepare my pre-service teachers. So everything in my work gravitates towards the question of pedagogy. So there. Anyway, so we might move on. The question with which our class started was basically as follows. A student asked, he or she has explored actually the first module a little bit, and they were wondering why do we have these video clips where people discuss the history of literacy? And that was a very good question. Because on the one hand, you might assume, well, we're gonna be teachers of literacy, so we better know how literacy developed over the millennia. Well, yes, that's a good assumption, but isn't it nice that sometimes we actually can ask questions and actually probe a bit deeper and find out, is there anything else why we actually were advised to watch these YouTube clips? So the discussion allowed us to actually flag some important um, concepts. So here we are. So obviously, we want to know about the history of literacy, how writing developed, what did the writing actually serve the community that invented it. Well, what do you think? People were doing things, right? People were doing things. And what were they doing? Well, they were trading with one another. They were actually trading not just with the neighbor, but actually the society started to become increasingly complex and people needed to record information. And this is how our first term of our first concept of our class has come up, which is information management. Right? So literacy was really and still is about information management. So all these symbols that you study, all these alphabets, all the technologies that we use in order to participate in literacy practices, all of them were actually invented in order for us as civilization to manage information better. So one of the inventions that happened, and you will actually learn if you listen to those videos, is the famous table. We take tables for granted today, but there's nothing granted in the table. So for example, if Mary owed me for, I don't know how to do triangles here. So, okay, let's insert the thing. So say this is Rai, and for the month of, say, July, that was probably marked as a circle. Mary owed me, say, let's assume this many lots of wheat or of money or of something, right? So you can see that information management was not just about saying this means Mary and this means July, but you put Mary and July together and some other value, which is the third value by which we were trading or which we used to trade, and all of a sudden we had a spreadsheet. See how information management works? So what is happening now, you're learning, but literacy is not so much about reading and writing, but it is about managing information. And it didn't evolve as sometimes, or is not evolving as magically people describe it in textbooks. What is happening, the society's needs are evolving, and as the society's needs evolve, we develop new ways to manage information increasingly better. So we develop new symbols, we develop spreadsheets, we develop iPhones, we develop all kinds of tools that allow us to manage information better and faster. So that's what evolution is. It's not that literacy evolves, but society's needs evolve, and as a result, we invent now systems to catch up with our needs. So you can straight away see how literacy is connected to what we do with it, not to what some people might actually call it, like letters, sentences, text, right? It's actually related to what we do with it. Now, if we were to answer the question, why are we actually looking through those videos? So first of all, they're first-class videos. I'm not giving you videos produced by Ania, Lian, and some sort of colleague of mine in village of, I don't know where. These are just top scholars, and they're wonderful to listen to. They teach you presentation skills. They teach you how to, they give you general knowledge about the field, and they also show you how much literacy is important, because it's not just that the guy in the museum talks about the development of literacy in Mesopotamia, but the guy who is a top scientist just above here, but we have him, Lloyd Seth from MIT. He's a quantum physicist. He's developing he is the person, the only person in the world that is focused, that focuses and works on quantum computers. And how does he start his lecture? With a little introduction about technology, not technology, literacy. And I said technology because literacy is technology. Literacy is technology because it is an invented way of managing information. This technology of information. That's what literacy is. It's technology of information. How can we work with information? How can we manage it so that it can actually do for us what we need it to do? Right? That's why it evolves. It evolves because we manipulate it continuously in order for it to actually be in our service. Great question. So I can't remember how else we moved on from there in the class, but we got to that. We truly did. So we obviously, as a teacher, what I do, I pick one concept that I introduced here and I carry it over to the next context, into the next context. It will be a bit hard to actually, for me, reflect the entire class how we went, but here was the problem. Well, first of all, I was trying to, and maybe you'll get it straight away, make a parallel that if we can think of literacy as information management, let me suggest to you to think about learning as information management. Right? I see no difference. And you would say, oh, Ania, we need two definitions, because if learning is a different word, why would we have for learning the same definition as for literacy? That is just maybe not right. It is very much right. Because what happens in life, our life, you could call it meaning making. Some people talk about it in these terms. I sometimes borrow this term because everybody uses it, so I can compromise. So I might just put the solution as well here, right? I don't like talking about meaning making so much as I like actually calling it for what it is, which is acting on an informed basis. Isn't it what learning should actually result in? Oh, beautiful. So literacy is information management and learning is information management because our entire life is about managing information, about our bodies, how to work with our bodies, how to work with our spirit, how to work with our mind, how to work with our people, how to be with our people. Everything is about information management. And learning is not about acquiring a content, it's actually about information management. That's why the curriculum will have all these higher order thinking skills, and I'll just drop them in here. So it will have the priorities, it will have social and personal capabilities, intercultural, ethical, critical thinking, and creativity. It does it because the people who wrote the curriculum, not necessarily the people who wrote all the support documents that you have all these translations there, because anxious people had to produce all these explanatory materials. Curriculum is a patchwork of many people and a kind of compromise. But anyway, learning is not about acquiring content because your computer has the content. Your computer has all the content that we ever will want the students to learn, and yet the computer at this very moment cannot do what we want our students to do, right? So it's not about learning, it is actually about doing things with information. It's about managing information in order to act on an increasingly informed basis. And this is a phrase I got from a very famous sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu. Maybe I mentioned Pierre Bourdieu somewhere in his name. So here, right, Pierre Bourdieu. But anyway, that's for when you do masters or PhD. For this very moment, what I am showing to you is that literacy is about information management, and learning also is about information management. It's about managing in order to actually be increasingly creative, innovative, be socially and ethical, culturally aware, and at the same time, a person who actually does things in consideration of the society. And as a result, you learn about your own place in the society. And you can see how I have just recited the general capabilities of the curriculum by mentioning all these terms. Anyway, so we've got these two little people. And what? And the question in the class which arose was that if we want this person, this girl, if we want to help this girl, say that we're teachers, right? And we as teachers want to always help people because we're good. Anyway, so now just the little sidetrack. In our on-campus class, I'm quite happy that we have quite a lot of non-early childhood teachers, which is really good. This will allow me to develop more resources. The frameworks are all there in the modules, but more resources that focus on non-early childhood teachers. We've got a lot for early childhood. So you've got, but by early childhood in Darwin, we mean from 5 to 8. And I'm sure that we have also students who deal with children, from 0 to 3 or from 0 to 5. So that's also covered there. But in terms of principle, not so much the detail. So at this very moment, we have covered the lower level and a bit of the upper, but I will be focusing also more on the upper, I gather. Anyway, so if you look at the explanation I'm producing now, it really doesn't matter what grade we're talking about because we're talking at the principal level. So here we go. We've got the little girl and the little boy, and she wants to act. She wants to use some communication. She wants to communicate with this boy, right? She wants to use some communication style thing, some sort of method to interact with this boy. And we want to help her so that she acts on an informed basis. What would we do? Well, we would tell her what to do, right? It's in curriculum, in the support materials of the curriculum, people say you just model it to her. The problem with modeling, of course, is that as a little hint now and then, it might be not a bad technique now and then. Say, well, just look how I do it, right? That's not too bad. But to base the entire teaching on modeling can be very problematic because you've got 25 students, and if you were to model every interaction and every step of the interaction, it practically would look like that you will be doing the assignments for them. Right? 25 students do 25 assignments. Everything in those assignments you actually model. Honestly, not only you would die doing this, but because it's very exhausting, but at the same time, it's unethical. You would be fixing things for them. Another thing that you would be probably doing is actually removing, through modeling all the time, you actually remove from them their power to actually be. Because they can only be through you. If you model, if you give them content and you model the content and you tell them what to learn, you actually remove from them the power of the right to be. Right? And that's problematic. Because whoever has children knows, and whoever worked with children in schools knows that children, and even us, at whatever age you are, we want to be, we want to talk, we want to say things. So there, and not only we remove the right to be, but we also, when we actually model and give them the content and do the things, another thing that we're doing is actually prevent them from critical assessment, ethical development, intercultural forms of evaluation, all of that. They have to do it themselves. So just to cut 1 hour short, but whatever we did over the period of an hour in classroom, all the discussions that follow were basically focusing on this very question, which is if we give it to them, they didn't get it themselves. Another thing that happened was not only they didn't do it themselves and we prevented them from actually actualizing their own power, another thing that happened was that we don't really know what life she has had before she engaged in an interaction with this boy. And something that nobody asked but needs to be asked also, whatever life he had, right? We need to actually recognize that both these people are not just objects of their teaching content, they actually are colorful little beings who actually have had lives and are, through this interaction they to engage, develop more life, and that life should be expansive because they're here to enjoy life. They didn't pop out from on this planet. They didn't pop up on this planet to actually be bored. They're here to do things, to be. And that presents problems. That presents problems because they're not figments of our imaginations. They're people with needs. They're people who have particular, they have brains organized by their social interactions. And unfortunately, I will not go in this podcast into the detail that we covered on campus, but these bits will be covered in other PowerPoints. But these people have brains shaped by the participations thus far. So what does this mean? In order for us to actually interfere with what they know, we would have to actually know a lot about what's happening in their heads and how their heads are structured. This is getting really messy and really difficult because not only you can't do it for one person, you can't do it for 27. Okay, so how do we help the girl to act on an informed basis? What is she to do to engage in the conversation, and how will she do it? So to cut a very long hour on campus short, what I decided or suggested to our students, that instead of us taking control over everything these kids are to do in classrooms, maybe a better way could be to give the student, this time the female, tools for exploring how best she could use information in order to learn about her audience, or we could call him interlocutor, which is the person with whom we interact. I'm not sure whether you know the term. I'll just write it here. Interlocutor. I never know which terms are really normal terms and which ones are sophisticated terms. I'm a little bit outside of that. Anyway, so maybe we could actually enable this student, or support the student with some tools that will allow her to manage her interaction with her partner or with her interlocutor and learn about his life and how best she could interact so that she acts on an informed basis. Well, that's different, isn't it? It's no longer what content will give her, what things will make her read, but in fact tools for her to explore information and challenge her own understanding in her own head about the interlocutor or about her audiences. So challenge her assumptions through the resources we will make available to her that will allow her to do it, the tools that will allow her to deal with these resources, so manage information, right? To deal with these resources in a way that is meaningful to her, so that she can have one aha and the other aha moments, one after another, and as a result she will learn about how to actually look at her own needs, communication needs in relation to her audiences, evaluate their relevance, evaluate what best would be to actually do in a situation in which she is and how to do it the best, right? So she's actually in control. Our responsibility as teachers is offer resources and tools for their management, okay? So resources and tools for their management. Maybe we should now do it in some other font so it's more visible. So resources and tools for their management. That's cool. Which one? Which one? This one. So resources and tools for their management, so that the student can actually now interact with her own understanding of the situation in which she is and make decisions that she assesses with the support we have provided as appropriate, and therefore learn about herself, learn about her audiences, and therefore attempt to act now on an informed basis. And this brings us to this rather complicated graph that I will just try to make it simpler, and here it is, my attempt. So basically, if we have these social, intercultural and critical capabilities in the curriculum, what I wanted to suggest that in this communication, the student needs to make assessment of her interlocutor. Now we as teachers need to support her in it, right? And now depending on the range of resources we will be using, we will have different outcomes. So for example, if a student needs to be assisted with the understanding of her audiences, the kinds of let's move here, the kinds of the kinds of tools that we will, the kinds of resources that we will give her might be either of the broader range or of the narrow range. Now the narrow range types of resources might actually prevent the child or prevent the student from considering herself in a larger context of life, right? Larger context. So we'll just make it transparent. Back. Something went wrong. So transparent, how do you make it transparent? Right, in a larger context of life. So we can actually keep giving her Dr. Seuss, and we can give her the Lion and the Mouse, and we might even throw in maybe one indigenous story or something. And what kind of picture of a society, which is under the intercultural ethical capabilities, I would actually make you not worry about all the rest here. I'll just cover it because it is actually too complicated for today. Right. So in order for her to engage with the audience, we now as teachers, when we supply the resources, we can either give her a wide spectrum of resources so that she actually creates a colorful picture of her community, or we can give her a narrow range of resources and basically imprinting on her mind that we're living in a monoculture. So our resources will, the kind of community which is intercultural ethical capability, the kind of community that we actually validate with the resources, which is the critical and creative capabilities, with the tools we give her to think with, right? So critical and creative capabilities is the range of text, the tools that we give students to actually to think with and draw information about the world from. So depending on the kinds of tools we give them, they will reflect or legitimize a different type of a community. If we give students narrow range, the idea of the community the student will develop is relatively narrow as a result, and then the audience, the way she will actually frame her interlocutor will be on the basis of those understandings. And what will she say about the interlocutor? Well, you either understand this way or there is no other way. There is no communication either but just this way. So what she does, she either creates an enemy from the person who might also be an Anglo person just like her. There's nothing wrong with that, but might not actually be of the same kind. Right, might not be a person who is actually narrow and disconnected from the society. Might be actually a boy who is connected with the society, living a big life, and actually interacts in relation to the reference frameworks that actually legitimize big life as opposed to narrow myopic village life. Right, so this is very important that we actually get it right from the beginning. So the point I wanted to make is that the curriculum has a 3-layer structure. That is true. The first layer is cross-curriculum priorities, right? They tell us, and I'll just come back to it. The second one are capabilities, and only the third one are subject areas with year-specific outcomes. That's very important to remember, and we will work with that. But now look at this. If we provide the student, and I might just borrow one of those arrows. If I just have to do that. Insert an arrow. Which one do we like? This one. We'll make it big so that we can see. Oh, we didn't do that big. We just made it blue. All right, this one. It's invisible here. Right. All right. So if this will be my teacher's stick, right? So if we provide the student with a broad range of resources so that to legitimize the world as it is, which is diverse and colorful, so that she develops a broad understanding of her audience or well-informed understanding of her audiences so that she can actually act on an informed basis. Now, with the cross-curriculum priorities, how difficult it is. I mean, all of that, the range, the validation of cultural differences, and also an informed understanding of one's social context now need to be actually filtered through specific types of resources, and how difficult it is when cross-curriculum priorities tell us, well, could you please engage resources that actually engage with the Asian region? They're not too far away from us, so it'd be good to know about the broader region. Could you also maybe include resources and knowledges that actually come from our indigenous citizens, so that we can actually know our history? And could you please do it in such a way that in terms of sustainability priority, that sustainability is not just only about environment, but it's also building social capital, building communities. So could you please do it in a way that enables children to see that they use these resources because they come, that they are the capital, the knowledge capital, the heritage of our civilization, so that they draw on the world in order to create a better world, right? So community, so they draw on the community knowledge in order to actually impact on the community. None of this is very difficult. It's very easy. Please rewind it to understand it if you needed to hear it again. It's very easy. Capabilities tell us about the values, and actually cross-curriculum priorities tell us about what kinds of resources we should be actually integrating, so that we don't lose the community and the broader regional aspect from our teaching, in our teaching. Oh, that's great. So we have it now. So I think we got there in our classes, in our class today. So we've done this, then we've done this, so we've discussed this. We've spoken a little bit about the brain, and that's so brain sciences. I do some pedagogic research, and in my pedagogic research, I actually look into brain sciences, and I looked also into different schools that were created, especially in Canada, and in the US, but in Canada especially, that help children with disabilities. And you can see this is a perfectly normal Canadian child who is learning to write in English. Now you can tell it's in English because in the culture in which we had been raised, where English learning or English learning of the English alphabet is presumed to mean just continue working on the English letters, this is a total misunderstanding of a human brain. Human brain doesn't see letters. Human brain sees relationships between shapes. So I can show you what the brain sees. The brain sees a line this way, then the brain sees a line that way, then the brain sees a line another way, sees dots. The brain sees qualities of shapes, like even here with phonemes. I'll come back to it soon. So what do they call it? Features. So the brain sees features. The brain doesn't see constructs. And that's very important, as I keep telling in my sort of seminars, which I teach on other things. Some of this I'll be teaching here. It's very important. And I didn't invent it. Professor Ramachandran, you will find him anywhere on YouTube. He's the world's greatest, biggest neuroscientist in California. And so he's the professor there. And what he's saying, you better have a brain that she sees features, not shapes, because if you're in the bush, right? And by the time you see that the jaguar, that the yellow spots or brown spots or something in the bushes is actually a jaguar, if you actually see the jaguar, by that time it's too late, you're eaten. So that's why the brain evolved to see features, so that you can very quickly construct those out of these features some hypothesis. Oh my goodness, that could be a leopard or something, and you run before you actually see it. Right? So the brain is actually reacting on features. And what they do, here's the example from the Aerosmith School in Canada. What these children do, they actually, in order to learn the alphabet in English, what they do, they actually play with different types of alphabets. They actually learn English through other languages so that they can actually be better in English. Some of you who actually have some background in second languages know that there is already a pretty good, pretty well established understanding that children who are multilingual have actually greater learning capabilities and so on. So anyway, this is just a thing. And talking more about neuroscience, so this is about phonetics, and that's very interesting. I took this photo from a video, as you can see, from a lecture. And what even here, what these people were saying, this was I just took it just this year, so it might have been recorded just, I don't know, a month ago or 2 months ago. Anyway, what this research is saying is very interesting, just for your own interest. There is no such a thing like phonemes. They are inventions of linguists, and you should know it by now, and if you don't, then you do. But anyway, the brain doesn't perceive phonemes. The brain works just like a visual system works with features. So does the audio, the hearing system also works with features, right? So, and that's why you can actually teach people phonemes, but when it comes to pronouncing things actually in a more global context, like entire paragraphs, everything falls apart, because people who, say, for example, someone like me, who have accents, obviously can say the word or a phoneme maybe, you know, in isolation, okay? But that's not how phonemes work in context. They actually sound differently when you pronounce them in the entire length of a speech. Anyway, so I just wanted to just flag these things to you to show you that the brain is more complicated than shapes and words and, you know, ready-made up constructs. The brain doesn't see construct, the brain constructs constructs. So if we give to children ready-made things, in fact, the brain doesn't hear it. The brain was not designed to hear the messages. The brain was designed to filter and construct according to what I see as my need. The brain developed or evolved in order to filter from the environment, from the information around, to filter shapes and qualities that actually allow me to create meaning from them. I create constructs. I don't see constructs, I create constructs. Now, as I was saying, it's getting really long, this lecture, but basically what I was saying is that if you see things like someone's face, this is research, this is not me saying, this is research by Ramachandran actually. So if you see someone's face, you develop in your head, in your brain, representations of a person's face in terms of cells. So you actually generate cells that represent features of my face or the face of your mother or whoever. And then you have a hierarchical arrangement until you start creating a mother cell of all those other cells, right? So it's an organizing cell that holds, it's like a file, it's like a file folder in your computer, right? So there's a folder and there's a whole tree structure underneath where you have all these other cells that talk to this mother cell. Point is, that is created by the brain, not by the teacher, not by the environment outside, right? Environment outside doesn't provide information. Your brain is locked in a dark case of your skull and has 5 senses to reach out. And with these senses, it tries to make sense out of the darkness. So it constructs light. We think there is light. There is no light. We have constructed the light because it helps us to see things better, and so on. Right? Isn't it interesting? But at the end of the day, if you think about it, whatever you take for granted, I see, I feel. As someone said, I just listened to the other day, argue with an owl whether the night is dark. Right? And the owl will talk to you about how light is the night. And who's right, you or the owl? Each of us uses sensory systems in order to make sense out of the world around us, right? To manage information. That's why I talk about information management. And that information management, supporting this information management process is the job of the teacher. Not to take the objects from the world and point to the child and say, see, mother, see, this is a good book, see, this is the alphabet. It doesn't work like this. What has to be done is that students need to be challenged, that the meaning management systems have to be challenged so that they can now reorganize information in their head. We could call it learning. So it's still about information management, but learning, because it's expansive and forward, there's a forward movement in learning, then maybe it's not necessarily about information management, but it is about information management in terms of its reorganization. So learning is about the reorganization of knowledge. Okay, so we had all these complex things in our class today, so it was all very good. Some students were laughing because they said they knew it all along. So why did we spend 2 hours talking about that? That makes me really happy. We did. Anyway, I'm sure that we didn't know lots of these things, but and they were laughing because the whole lecture was made for us to have a good time. So here's our curriculum and 3 levels: level 1, cross-curriculum priorities; level 2, personal and other capabilities that tell us that guide us in the selection of our resources in terms of the range and what they do to the way how our students actually construct their audiences and the society in which they live. And then we have subject areas with their outcomes for each of the subject area per every year. And here's a 3-layer curriculum. Now, all these terms like symbolic capital here, if you want to read it, you will see that symbolic capital means how these different capabilities, which is symbolic capital means actually meaning, right? How do we give meaning to those questions? Anyway, you can just read it for yourselves if you want to. I pretty much explained what I needed you to know for a while. Now, in terms of assessment, we will be working next week. Now, trying to take this model, pardon me, we will try to take this model and now see how we can translate what initially was the story about the boy and the girl, right? So we started with the boy and the girl trying to communicate. And of course, as a teacher, I had to make it complicated. I had to actually ask the question, so how we as teachers would enable this female student to interact with her interlocutor on an informed basis. How would we do it? So now I produced this story and you listen to it, hopefully you're not asleep. And now what we will do is in week 2, translate it to assignment 1, which is me as this girl, what types of capabilities and course curriculum priorities, how can I relate my own literacy skills? How can I look at them through the prism, right? How can I look at my own literacy skills, the ones I have and the ones I should have, right? So it doesn't have to be that at the age of 21 I've got it all. It could be what I should be doing, right? So how can I use those capabilities and cross-curriculum priorities as a prism for evaluating my literacy skills, what I do? How do I use literacy and what are my literacy skills? What do these capabilities and curriculum priorities, cross-curriculum priorities tell me about my own literacy? So we will ask ourselves questions about the resources we use, the range, what type of society do the resources we use actually help us to construct? Do I live through the resources I use, the literacy resources I use, and literacy interactions that I engage in? Do they actually vindicate the life around me as broad and colorful and multicultural, or am I still living in a relatively narrow space? And obviously I will expand, but is there room for expansion? And therefore, how do these resources that I use, what do they tell me about the people I interact with? And also, that what do they tell me about the choices I make in my interactions? Am I continuously stuck with what I always knew, which is what the people on the social scientists are saying, that people through their interactions, whether they are online or in person, they tend to do online what they do in person, which is always talk and be with people that they already know. Very rarely people actually get out of their comfort zone to actually expand and see all other things, the things that, be friends with on Facebook with communities and people that they don't know that are beyond them. How many of you are friends on Facebook with neuroscientists or with people who are absolute gurus in terms of statistics? Or see what I'm saying? I'm just using my own examples, but that's what I'm saying. All right, and then how all of those values are reflected through my Asian encounters, my indigenous engagements, and also the ways in which I build communities. Okay, so that will be week 2. Thank you very much.